I once thought survival meant forgetting his face. He used to shove me in crowded hallways and laugh at my soft voice. Years later, in a hospital where I wore the coat he swore I'd never earn, he walked in again. Older, shaking, ready to say the impossible. At last, sorry. Stay with me, friend, subscribe, and share. Because healing is real, and this story might help someone tonight. Somewhere out there. If you were sitting across from me now, in a quiet clinic exam room where the clock hums and the chair sighs when you settle back, I would tell you this gently, with my hands open. I am a physician, I am gay, and I am in love with a man who once made the sound of my name feel like a bruise. Many of you may have lived long enough to know that life writes in spirals and circles, not neat lines. So let me share mine, in a voice as steady as a heartbeat. Because if you have ever wondered whether good can grow in a place you feared, I want to speak to that place carefully and show you what careful love can do. I grew up in a small Ohio town called Maple Ridge, a place where winters were loud with plows and summers smelled like cut grass and gasoline. My mother, Carmen, worked nights at a nursing home, telling me stories at breakfast about the beauty of quiet dignity, about how pain softened when someone held your hand and counted breaths with you. My stepdad, Frank, coached Little League and believed a kid should learn to throw a ball even if the ball felt like it had a mind of its own. I had a mind of my own, for sure. I read more than I swung, dreamed more than I drove. There was always a book in my backpack and lotion on my chapped hands. I used to hum when I walked. That little habit caught attention. It would. A boy humming under his breath at Maple Ridge High was like a postcard from someplace people warned you never to visit. The first time Logan Carter ever said my name out loud, it was to tell me to move. He was a junior when I was a freshman, a head taller, shoulders like a doorframe. People spent homeroom cataloging his assets, his grin, his arms, the easy way he moved through a crowd because a crowd moved for him. He had a baseball cap hooked in his back pocket and a laugh that sounded like an accidental compliment. He smelled like laundry detergent and a kind of soap you buy when you do not have to look at the price. He was a star, the kind Maple Ridge raised like crops, steady, straight, a known quantity. And then, when I did not move fast enough on the narrow staircase near the cafeteria, he pressed a palm against my backpack and sent me one step down farther than I planned to go. "Careful," he said, almost playful, voice warm as if nothing hurt. I did not fall. But I learned to take the long way. He was not the only one who noticed me. But he was the one they watched when he watched me. That is how power works unspoken. It choreographs a room with a flick of an eyebrow. During sophomore year, I cut through the gym hallway to avoid the main corridor, and he and his friends rounded the corner like a gust of wind in Letterman jackets. One of them, Harris, let his shoulder brush mine. "You're in our way, Eli," he said. Logan's gaze flicked toward me, then down, then up again like I was to be inventoried. "We're late," Logan said to the hallway more than to me. He punctuated late with that almost polite chuckle, like he could not be bothered to anger because the world kept him entertained. That day, I realized I was not a person to him. I was a thing that could be moved. The words people used about me were polite to their face and cruel around the edges, sensitive, soft, dramatic. One of the girls in my chemistry lab told me I was brave for liking music the way I did, which felt like being called brave for breathing, like a compliment disguised as a brand. It was Logan's voice, though, that defined the shape my days took. He never used slurs while a teacher could hear. He knew how to be careful. But his friends did, and if they did in front of him, he looked at the ceiling, whistled, or smiled. He once flicked my ear with the corner of a study guide in the library, our tables exactly 2 apart, and when I looked up, he scanned his phone like he was bored and said, "Oops." He never called me by my name, not the right one. He tested versions of it, let his friends stamp footprints over every letter. L, Elliot, Eli, E. I felt erased in real time, one clipped syllable at a time. I survived high school by learning the shape of quiet. There are many kinds of quiet. There is the quiet you choose because you are tired of the noise. There is the quiet you pull around yourself like a sweater. And there is the quiet that happens when you are trying not to give anyone else a handle to grab. I found sanctuary in the nurse's office where Ms. Porter kept tissues like white flags. Sometimes I pretended to have a headache to sit where the fluorescent lights hummed kinder. She would look at me, brown eyes, near soft with understanding, and say, 10 minutes, okay? Then back in. She never asked for the whole story. Not asking was her way of saying she knew it was too heavy to lift alone. I kept my head down and my grades went up. I could count to 20 different ways in anatomy class and name every bone you could break with your pride intact. I learned small, life-saving things, like how long you can hold your breath and still speak, and larger things, like how to be human even when it feels expensive. I had a secret then, the same secret many of you know by heart. I knew I was gay before I knew what the word was supposed to cover. There were boys who lit up a room for me, and I felt lit but never looked for it, because Maple Ridge taught me some fires are to be put out before they spread. My best friend Erica, who stood at 5'2" and wore combat boots with her prom dress like a dare to anyone who wanted to look, sat with me on the hood of her car one night our junior year and said, as if commenting on the weather, "When you tell me you're gay, and you will when you're ready, I'm going to say thank you for trusting me." She darn near saved my life with that sentence. Love can be that kind of sentence, the kind that makes your chest feel less like a cage. As for Logan, he was there. In class, in the halls, on the baseball field with a swing that made the whole bleachers go silent for a moment like they were sharing a breath. He dated a girl named Caitlin who wore glossy lips and different colored hair ties around her wrist. He clapped for home runs and took pictures with the principal at banquets. And in the month before graduation, he slid a note into my locker by mistake. I say by mistake because his face when I read it and looked up held true panic. The note said, in hurried pencil, "Coach wants to see you about the lineup. He's in the office." It was for Harris, I think. I went to the office because I was a polite kid. Coach looked up and squinted, then laughed soft like he was sorry. When I left, Logan waited in the hallway, one foot braced against the wall. "Wrong locker," he said, light. I nodded. He could have left it at that. Instead, he added, "You move fast when a man tells you to, huh?" A friend guffawed behind him. It was not the worst thing anyone ever said to me, but for some reason it drilled deep. I remember walking away feeling as if he had dyed the air and I would never wash it out. I graduated early by one semester thanks to extra classes. You could see my plan in the way I packed. I had lint rollers and shower shoes and a bent acceptance letter to a college far enough away I could build a whole new vocabulary. I told my mother and Frank, who hugged me until my shoulders popped. Erica drove me to the airport like she was driving me to a safer version of myself. Before I walked into security, she cupped my face, stared at me as if I were the page of a book she would not forget, and said, "You're done with that boy. You hear me?" I nodded, all the while wondering how done gets done. There are boys you think you leave behind at a bus stop while you ride into your next life, and then one day you glance out the window and realize they have been jogging along the route for miles. Not even out of breath. I went to Boston for college. Boston has a way of making you feel like the city itself is older and is watching you with fondness. I learned to wear a scarf without looking fussy, to study late while a snowstorm creaked outside, to say wicked in the proper context. I told my roommate I was gay by leaving a note on the fridge that said, "Please stop drinking my oat milk and also I'm gay." He left a note under it that said, "Bought you more oat milk. Proud of you." It turns out most love is practical like that. I called my mother on Sundays and listened to her talk about the women down her hall who called the nurse buttons doorbells. I learned medicine slowly and then all at once. There is a language to the body, and once you learn it, every story a person carries shows up in the numbers, the size, the way they flinch when you touch their wrist, or how they hold your gaze as if it is a rope and they are in water. I promised myself I would be someone people could trust. I knew what trust felt like broken and the clever ways people pretend not to notice when they do the breaking. There were other men in those years. Kind ones, messy ones, funny ones. People who taught me how to take a compliment and how to walk away with my dignity when someone's "I'm not ready" felt older than me. I went to therapy. I did not know what therapy was supposed to look like when you are a boy from a town where therapy felt like a luxury you judged yourself for wanting. But in a room that smelled like eucalyptus, a woman named Dr. Leung taught me that feelings are guests. You welcome them. You do not let them uninstall the cabinets. You do not pretend not to hear the doorbell. You greet them, offer water, and learn that even the ones that scare you do not always stay. We talked about Logan exactly twice that first year. Both times I said, he did not hit me. He just made me feel smaller. And she said, not being hit is not the only definition of safe. And I wrote the sentence down. Years unfolded. White coats, long nights, cups at hospital coffee carts that taste like hope, even when it is just caffeine. I took a residency in San Francisco because I wanted to live where fog could tuck the city in at night, and I could walk hand in hand with a boy without scanning for the car behind us too closely. San Francisco is generous like that. Not easy, not perfect, but generous. I learned to stand in rooms where people were scared and be the calm thing. I learned how to deliver hard news, and I learned that sometimes the braver thing is letting your voice shake a little. It was a Tuesday when he walked back into my life. It was a kind of day you do not write down unless something happens, steady, gray, waiting for a mark. I was post-call tired, scrubbing my hands in the ER after a delicate, ordinary thing, stitches on a little boy's forehead after he ran into a coffee table and showed me his bravery like a trophy. The doors opened with the sound that doors always make in an ER, the private sigh of crisis. A man pushed an older gentleman in a wheelchair, half running, half praying under his breath. Chest pain, he told the triage nurse, breathless. Started at breakfast. Dad, tell him where it hurts. I heard the way the word dad cracked in his mouth when it came out. I turned. I saw his hands first because he was still bracing the chair and his fingers were splayed and white at the knuckles. They were carpenter's hands or firefighter hands, built for holding and catching. Then I saw his face and time did a trick. The kind where it cocks its head and asks if you are paying attention. Logan. Older by more than a decade, and yet the photograph of him in my head shifted to match. Jawline broadened. A clean beard holding the shape of his mouth. Hair cut close as if he liked discipline now. He wore a navy sweatshirt and a gold chain that caught the fluorescent light and made a gentle argument for beauty in all places. His eyes were the same, bright and oddly careful. He looked up and our gazes locked, and I swear you could hear a long, echoing hallway in the space between us. Then he said, not to me, but to the nurse, please, and the desperation knocked every high school hallway out of his voice at once. In the ER, we triage the need in front of us. We do not pick and choose our past. So I walked toward him and bent down to meet his father's eyes, calm as a page. Sir, I'm Dr. Elliot Reyes, I said, my voice steady. I want to make sure you can breathe. Can you tell me where the pain is? The father's name was Walter. His shirt said Wally's Hardware in a font that said he trusted practical things. He gripped the armrest and gasped when he tried to talk. Left side, he managed. Jaw, we moved. EKG pads, oxygen, blood work. A nurse named Ben called out numbers we needed, and I filed them like prayers. We've got you, I told Walter, because sometimes you say the thing you hope to make true just by saying it. Logan stood back against the wall, fingers pressed to his temple, as if he could halt a thought there by force. When he looked at me again, the recognition in his eyes had changed shape. It was not just surprise. It was a complex calculus, the kind where the answer means you do not get to say you did not know. I did not let any of that show. Medicine is, in part, the discipline of refusing to take a patient's fear personally. The EKG did not scream. It whispered concerns. Walter's blood work came back, and his markers were elevated enough to make our path clear. He needed observation, monitoring, and possibly a cath. I explained all this to father and son in a tone that would make sense even if you were too distressed to do math in your head. The good news is you got here quickly, I added, because I could see how much Logan needed to know one thing he did had helped. Time matters. You did right. Logan closed his eyes. He nodded once, and then against some corner of his own expectations, he said quietly, Thank you, Doctor. It was the first time in the history of our knowing that he said thank you to me and meant the whole sentence. I did not plan to see him again that day. After we placed Walter in observation with the cardiology team looped in. But emergency rooms make a town out of strangers. You pass by people again because they have nowhere else to go yet. I was finishing a note when Logan appeared in the doorway, hands in his pockets, shoulders squared like he had decided to be brave and was trying the pose on. Excuse me? he said, careful like the door to a quiet room. Dr. Reyes? He paused and said the name like he had never said it, which was true. Can I ask a non-medical question? I glanced at the clock. I had 10 minutes before an ultrasound. 10 minutes can be an entire lifetime if you handle it gently. Sure, I said. Walk with me. We moved down the hall at my pace, which was slower than his adrenaline wanted. We stopped near a cart with small bottles of sanitizer lined up like chess pieces. He looked at the floor and then at me as if he was asking permission to enter a story. Were you, Elliot? From Maple Ridge? He asked. There it was, the Ohio in his voice he had worked to lose. It finds you again when you are tired. Yes, I said simply. He swallowed. I'm Logan, he said, and the name hung between us like a weather report both of us already knew. Logan Carter. I know, I answered. And then I waited. Silence is a scalpel in the right hands. It cuts through defensiveness when you use it with care. He nodded as if the world had decided. His eyes moved over my face, and I felt a part of me I had not visited in years get up, go to the door, and listen. I'm sorry, he said. Then he shook his head, starting over. No, I'm not sure the word sorry does the work. I was a coward, and I was cruel, and I made being you harder because being me felt like walking barefoot on glass, and I wanted someone else to bleed. There's no reason that makes it okay. It's just the truth. I did not expect to hear any of that. I have seen transformations in patients that look like miracles. Blood pressure steadied by the right cocktail, pain soothed by attention and science. But I had never watched the beginning of a transformation in a man I once thought would never learn the language I spoke. My chest felt tight, the way it does when your body remembers winter even in late June. Your father is stable, I said first, because that was my job. He nodded. Thank you, he said again. Then quieter, thank you for not. I don't know what I thought you'd do. Throw me out? Let me feel it? He smiled without humor. You were always kinder than I deserved. I looked at him. It is easy to make enemies a single shape, to pour all the many complicated things about them into one mold and set it in concrete. It is harder to allow someone the dignity of being a person who was young and stupid and scared and training himself to survive in a house where love was conditional and tenderness was punished. You can allow it without excusing anything. I took a slow breath the way I do when I'm about to give a patient both good news and instructions. I won't take your apology away from you, I said, and I won't pretend hearing it didn't move something around inside me. But accountability is not a moment. It's a practice. Your words matter. Your actions will matter more, he nodded like a penitent. I know, he said. Then he swallowed again. If I wrote you a letter, would you read it? I don't expect anything. I just need to put it somewhere besides my own head. I gave him the clinic's general mailing address because I have boundaries I honor like holidays. He repeated it, then took out his phone, hesitant, as if he thought I might slap it away. I did not. We parted with a polite nod. I walked away and leaned against the wall at the end of the corridor, and I felt every year between 17 and 32 crunch under my shoes and dissolve. Walter did well. He went home with prescriptions and an argument from me he promised to heed. I will walk, he said, shaking my hand with a grip that told me he liked winning. I'll eat fewer sausages. I'll see your face if I don't. He laughed, and Logan laughed with him. And that laugh was the first one from Logan that did not break something open in me. It stitched a little. That night, after an onion-laden burrito on my couch, I sat with my laptop and a cup of tea my mother insists keeps me human, and I wondered how people change. My phone pinged. Erica, now living in Chicago with loudly patterned furniture and a louder laugh, texted, "You're old now. You can handle a ghost." I texted back a picture of the burrito and wrote, "My ghost is lactose intolerant." She sent a heart then after a pause. "You're safe. Remember that." The letter arrived 4 days later. Real paper with a real stamp. My name handwritten in a careful print that made me picture him hunched over a table late at night, choosing his words like he was choosing screws from a drawer. It was 6 pages long, and it was not an apology in the cheap internet-born sense. It was such a detail-rich accounting of his failures that I had to stand up twice and walk around my chair because sitting with it felt like sharing air with a storm. He wrote about his father's expectations and the way fear makes you cruel if no one has handed you a different script. He wrote about the time he saw me crying in the back of the library and pretended not to notice because comfort felt like a language he could only speak to people he had permission to love. He wrote about himself like he was testifying against a man he used to be and did not want back. He wrote, "I handled my own terror by testing you, and that was an act of violence." He wrote, "If it would help anyone, I will make a list of every boy I made smaller and go knock on their doors." And he wrote, "I do not want your forgiveness as a trophy I can point to and say, see, I am not the bad guy anymore. I want to do the work it takes to live in a way that would have kept you safe, if I had known how back then." I closed my eyes. I called Dr. Leung, who left me a voicemail that sounded like a friend in the back pew of a church. "You can consider meeting him for coffee, if you want, but not because his pain deserves to be alleviated by your kindness. Only if yours does. Also, he doesn't get to say what happens next. That's you." I texted Logan a day later. We had exchanged numbers at discharge in case any medication questions came up, a sentence both of us understood as neutral ground. I wrote, "Coffee outside the hospital." Not a date. A conversation. I'll choose the place, and I'll sit closest to the exit. "You will listen more than you speak. If that works for you Saturday at 10, he responded almost immediately, "Yes, of course." "Thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Elliot." "Thank you, Elliot." We chose a cafe near Dubose Park where old dogs argued with pigeons like traffic cops and the world felt forgiving. He sat before I got there, hands folded, posture like a kid in a principal's office who has decided he does not need to grin to get out of trouble. He wore a green sweater and the same chain. The sunlight made the tiny scar under his jaw gleam. We said hello like we were being watched, which we were, by the versions of us who stood back to back inside our bodies measuring the door. "I'm here to listen," he said, and for the next 2 hours, he did. I told him what it felt like to be in a space where your body is announced before you are, where people who have never hugged you still know how to make your shoulders touch your ears. I told him about the day he pushed me on the stairs and called it a joke. He closed his eyes and said, "I remember the way your backpack strap sounded when it slid. I think about it when I put on my tool belt because it makes me slow down." He was a carpenter now. He built cabinets and staircases in houses with bay windows, the kind of houses you do not know how to speak politely in when you first moved to San Francisco. He had not married. He had not dated men or women seriously. "I didn't give myself permission," he confessed. "And then the person I wanted to ask forgive me moved to a city where the ocean could carry my name away. So I worked. I went to therapy." He grinned. "You tell a therapist you were a bully, you have to tip extra." I smiled despite myself. "You think you are funny?" I said, but my voice was not cold. "I think humor is the only tool I had that never rusted," he replied. "But I will set it down, if you need me to." He could talk like that now. In my memory, his sentences had been blunt objects. Now he used words like ladders and stepped down when I needed him to. He did not touch me. He did not ask for another coffee. He asked for a list. "Tell me the things I can do that would make your life better in any way. Not because I want to buy my way out of guilt with good deeds. If there is labor I can take off your hands, I want to try." It startled me, but it made a tender kind of sense. "Okay," I said. "Volunteer with the youth center on 16th. They need mentors who can fix things and sit in quiet when a kid doesn't talk. Donate to Erica's nonprofit because she was the first person to tell me I was safe. And write a letter to Ms. Porter at Maple Ridge and tell her she was right to keep tissues in that room." He took his phone out and made a note like it was a prescription he intended to fill. And then, because human beings are illogical and hearts have their own math, we kept meeting, once a week. The sun was often shining in that way San Francisco knows how to shine, clean and bright and a little shy, and we would sit on a bench and talk about small things, nail guns and city buses and which grocery store kale is the least sullen in, and then a large thing in the middle like a stone. We did not flirt. We built something slower than flirtation, something the speed of varnish drying. I told him how when a door closes too fast behind me, I still feel a hand on my back. He told me how his father did not like men who made dinner. He told me he makes dinner most nights now as a private rebellion, chopping onion like he is practicing mercy. He told me the scariest thing that had ever happened to him was not the night he got pulled over and thought, "This is it." It was admitting in a therapist's office that he had hurt a boy he could not stop thinking about when he framed new windows because sunlight. He called me Sunlight by accident one day, and he went quiet and pale like he had set off an alarm. I knew then I was not the only one carrying an echo. There are people who will stop listening now because they are afraid of the shape this story will take. It is enough to say we did not become a couple in a montage. There were no violins. The first time he reached for my hand, he did it with his hand placed palm up on the cafe table between us and his eyes on mine, asking without a word and waiting for the yes my yes needed to grow. I put my hand in his carefully. We sat like that, two men with a history so heavy the table creaked, and we let a new history set like concrete around our fingers. My heart did not race. It settled. That is how I knew we were safe enough to try. He met Erica, who looked at him over the rim of her mug like a judge with a soft spot for sinners. He answered questions without defensiveness. What will you do when a memory hurts him and it is your face he sees? He said, I will stay unless he tells me to go, and then I will move my body from the room, but keep my heart at the door, so the second he needs me, I am not far. What will you say when your father's voice stands in the doorway of your mind? He said, I will say, Dad, I'm building another door. What if he can never forgive you? He said, then I will be in love with someone who saved my life without owning me, and that will be the truest thing I can carry. We built little rituals because rituals make order out of nervous systems. Thursday nights he made dinner. Sundays I dragged him to the market and made him pick the ugliest tomato because ugly often means honest. Friday mornings we walked before work, and he timed his steps to mine. When a bus backfired and my shoulders jumped without my permission, he did not shh me or tuck me in. He said, that was loud, in a voice that told the little boy in me it was normal to notice what hurt. He set the table as if it mattered to lay out forks with care. When he laughed now, it was quieter, and he laughed because joy was a real thing, not because a room told him he was important. It was not all easy. How could it be? An old classmate of ours found a photo from the senior roast. In the background, a younger Logan mugged for the camera with a look on his face, like he had invented the kind of swagger that makes a boy like me cross a street early. You could see, if you zoomed in, a poster with a joke written in thick black marker aimed at boys like me. It was 1,000 tiny cuts printed on glossy paper. Someone put it on a Maple Ridge alumni group and tagged me with a winky face. He texted me a screen grab before I saw it anywhere, as if he could throw himself between me and a car. I felt heat flood my chest, old and slick. I told him I needed space. He said, of course, and his eyes were wet, and he did not argue. For 3 days, I slept on my couch on purpose, telling my bed I would be back when I trusted night again. He sent 1 text a day. Day 1, I'm here. Day 2, I understand why this hurts. I hate that I did not know how to love anyone then. Day 3, no response needed. I have a meeting with the youth center tonight. I am making copies of my story so the kids know who I was. On the 4th day, I called him. He answered breathless as if he had run down a hall. I told him to come over. When he did, he stood in the doorway until I waved him in, making sure he walked into my house at the speed my nervous system set. We sat on the floor with our backs against the couch and did not touch for a long time. Because sometimes, the gentlest thing to do is not to reach for the person you love like grabbing a bar in a windstorm. When I leaned toward him, finally, he pressed his shoulder against mine as if we were kids sitting against a gym wall, waiting for our names to be called, except this time. We chose each other. He spoke at the youth center that week. The kids sat in metal folding chairs like they were riding a bus somewhere, looking out windows only they could see. He told them he used to be the person their favorite songs whispered about, when they said, I'm not going back there. He told them about therapy, and about how shame will tell you that sitting in a circle and saying I was wrong is a cliff you cannot survive. He told them about his father, and he did not blame him. He described him like the weather, something that shaped you without meaning harm. Then he said, some of you might be here because you don't know how to love the parts of yourself that scare the town you came from. I want to say this like a craftsman tells you which saw to choose. Pick the tool that cuts clean. The cleanest cut is always honesty. Tell 3 people the truth, and if one of them leaves, call the other 2. I watched a boy in the back who wore his hoodie like armor look up and listen for the first time. We visited Maple Ridge together once, 2 years into whatever we were. It felt like a pilgrimage no one asked for. We parked outside the high school in summer when the building slept. Logan went inside and asked to see the principal like he was asking to borrow a book. The woman was new, brisk, a nice kind of tired. He told her he used to be part of the problem. He asked if he could fund a little room with couches and good light where soft kids could rest their foreheads when the hallway got loud. She looked at him as if she had seen men like him break promises, and yet here he was, making one that could be kept with money and a careful carpenter's eye. She said yes. He said, "And if you're willing, I would like to talk to the baseball team before a game." She looked at his hands, at his posture, at me, at the way my body leaned toward or away from him. "If he says it's okay," she said, nodding toward me. I said it was okay, because boys with donors learn what generosity looks like, and I wanted them to see it wearing broad shoulders and humility. He told them that day about the way a joke can be a weapon, and how a nickname can become a leash. He told them about a kid named Elliot who is a doctor now, and who knows how to hold a beating heart between his hands metaphorically, and sometimes literally, and how he tries to build houses sturdy enough for that kind of man to come home to. He did not cry. He did not offer a moral. He handed them his own younger face and let them decide what to do. One of the boys asked, "So are you like together?" and blushed, as if he had reached into a drawer labeled private. Logan looked at me. I looked at Logan. And we did not make a joke, because we did not owe anyone cover. "Yes," I said. "We are together." A couple of boys nodded, filing a new normal where there used to be a story about how men are supposed to sit on a bench. If there are gods who watch over high school baseball fields, I think they must have set a little wind to moving right then, lifting sweat off brows and softening the word together in their mouths. We did not marry fast. We took our time. We built a life like you build a porch, measuring twice, cutting once, asking for a second pair of hands when you cannot carry a beam alone. He met my mother, and she hugged him the way she hugs her residents when they forget what they are afraid of for a moment. "Your hands are warm," she said, and he looked startled at the tenderness of an observation that simple. He met Frank, who asked him if he knew anything about baseball beyond swagger. Logan said, "I know about a good stance," and then he looked at me because he knew I would laugh later. We drove to the coast and learned what silence between two people can feel like when it is not a threat, but a prayer. We had a fight about something small and real, paint sample colors for kitchen cabinets, and then bigger about who gets to define safety in the house we share. He learned that my version of safety sometimes meant naming an anxiety out loud even if it felt clumsy. I learned that his version of safety sometimes meant saying, "I need to fix something with my hands right now," and letting him replace a warped board on the porch instead. Of taking a walk where people could hear us argue. Through open windows. His father died the year we decided to move in together, on a Thursday that smelled like rain and the heavy crackle of summer storms. We flew to Ohio. In a small church where the carpet had carried 1,000 tears, Logan stood to speak and looked younger than I had ever seen him. He did not rewrite Walter into an angel. He said, "My dad was a hard man who taught me to stand up straight and forgot sometimes to say why it mattered. He loved me like a man who walked with a limp loves running, awkwardly, bravely. We did not agree on what a family could look like, but I will say his name with gratitude because I am still here, and he got me this far." After the service, a woman with a frost of white hair touched my sleeve and said, "He looks at you like you built him a house." I nodded and thought I only gave him the tools. He built it. Later that night, in the quiet of a guest room that had once held trophies and now held the scent of dust and mothballs, he lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. I rested my palm on his chest and felt grief move under bone like weather. He said, "I used to be absolutely certain I'd become him," and his voice broke, not loud, just broken. "And then I see the life I got to build and I think, he missed out on the best parts of me. I wish we had time for me to show him." I turned my palm against his skin and said the thing I know how to say. "You are showing him," I said. "You are showing him every day you love without asking a boy to be smaller first." He nodded, tears slicking his face sideways. He held my hand like a promise he had already kept. When we clicked keys on our front door together for the first time after that trip, moving boxes around like a chess match, fridge magnets in an overflowing bowl on the counter, he set a plant on the kitchen sill, a single green thing in an old ceramic pot. "This is Marvin," he said. "We are going to try to keep him alive." I laughed and kissed his temple, a soft hello. Marvin is still alive, in case you were worried, a little lopsided and wonderfully stubborn. I would be lying if I told you the past never walked through our living room. It did. Sometimes we walked it back out together. Sometimes I handed him the leash. Sometimes he needed to tell me that he had woken with a dream in which he was 19 and mean, and I needed to say, "You can forgive that boy without inviting him to dinner." He keeps a little box in the hall closet with mementos from home in it, a varsity patch, an old cap of his father's, 2 nails bent into awkward hearts by a kid who probably wanted to prove to himself he could shape metal with his hands. When he is quiet in that way he gets, like the tide has gone out and forgotten something, he sometimes opens the box and lays things out on the kitchen table. He does not need me to narrate. He needs me to sit. So I sit and hold a nail while he holds the cap, and we make a small museum of the man he used to be and the man he is now. Our wedding, when it came, was not grand. We stood in the backyard of a friend's house in Oakland, under a string of lights that made everyone's faces soft and honest. I wore a suit that felt like permission to be seen. He wore the chain he never took off, and a flower in his lapel he cut and pinned himself with the precision that makes a cabinet door swing without a sound. Erica cried like she had been waiting for this playoff win her whole life. My mother wore her lucky necklace and held Frank's hand like a brace. We said the words that make 2 lives 1 life with witnesses, and the vows we wrote were not dramatic. They were blueprints. I will admit my fear without making it the driver. I will turn the kettle on when it is your turn to cry. I will fix the things I break even if they are invisible. We kissed, and it was like putting a stamp on a letter you have rewritten until your hand ached. We built a home where morning coffee tasted like being allowed to be a person who had not always been brave but was now. We hosted kids from the youth center on Saturdays sometimes, taught them how to use a level and how to make eggs and how to sit at a table and name 3 good things you saw this week. One of the boys became a nurse and sent us a photo of his badge like a Christmas card. Ms. Porter wrote back, thanking Logan for his letter and telling him she had always known he could learn tenderness because he watched her without cruelty when he was bored in her office once. And a boy who can stand in a room where someone is crying and not make a sound is a boy who could learn to hand over a tissue with care. On the anniversary of that ER day, we went back to the hospital and dropped off pastries like grateful ghosts. The triage nurse, the one who caught the way the word "dad" cracked in Logan's mouth, was there. She hugged him like family. "How's your father?" she asked. "He passed," Logan said. And then, because he had learned how to tell the truth without dressing it in apology, he added, "We were okay by then." She squeezed his arm. We left, and he exhaled a laugh like relief and nostalgia had a baby. I suppose what I want to say, to you who might be listening with headphones on while you water your plants or sit quietly in a chair with a sweater across your lap, is that this story holds both things at once. The boy who made me walk with my eyes on the ground and the man who now watches the sidewalk when we go out so I do not have to. He bullied me until he loved me, they might say, as if love were the thing that stopped the bullying, as if the ending justifies the beginning. But that is not the chemical equation we discovered. Here is the truth. He bullied me, and he learned to love, and those are 2 separate sentences joined by years of work and the orchestration of empathy. Forgiveness is not a trap. It is a tool. You do not owe it to anyone. It is a gift you can give your own nervous system when you decide the person in front of you has earned the right to make your life easier, not harder. Every night when he locks the door, Logan presses the deadbolt in with his thumb and then turns to me as if to say, "All clear." I say, "Thank you," without making it a ceremony. He leaves notes on the fridge when he works late. Not just going to be late. "Can I bring home soup?" He asks consent for the small things so the big things never sneak up on us. He laughs in bed, but never at me. He built a bench by our front door with a low shelf for shoes. Every pair of mine sits neatly now, a kindness I did not know existed as a thing you could see. Sometimes, on a morning when the fog has wrapped the city in cotton, we will walk to Dubose Park and watch the dogs. He will point at a picky dachshund and say, "Look, that's me trying to pick tile." I will point at a golden retriever who looks back over his shoulder every 3 steps to make sure his person is still there and say, "That's me in Costco." We will laugh. We will buy bagels. We will go home to Marvin and the plant he has somehow not killed. When we get to the crosswalk, if a car rolls too close, he will stand between me and it without checking to see if I mind. I do not mind. I also do not need it every time. We learn. We adjust. We delight in how little the past can ask of our present when we feed the present good food. When I listen to couples in my clinic who sit 10 inches apart like a yard of history, I think of us. I tell them to name one thing they can do for each other tonight that will make tomorrow kinder. Sometimes it is as simple as moving the lamp to the other side of the bed. Sometimes it is apologizing without a parenthetical. I do not tell them my whole story because a clinic room is not my stage. But when they ask me, does it get better, with a look that tells me they are not talking about their blood pressure, I say, it can. And I believe myself when I say it, not because my life is a movie where the villain learned to dance, but because I know the sheer, stubborn power of people deciding to be better and then proving it with small evidence, again and again, until trust is a thing you can lean your elbow on. One night, not long ago, we sat on our porch, watching the neighborhood go soft. A neighbor walked a little girl up the street in pajamas, carrying a flashlight like a sword. The city smelled like rain on dust. He turned to me and said, "You know the worst thing I ever did?" His voice was calm, like a man starting a confession he knows he can finish. I nodded. "The worst thing I ever did was convince you were a person the world was right about." He rubbed his thumb against the seam of his jeans. "The best thing I ever learned was how to prove you otherwise." I put my hand on his knee and squeezed. An old language for "I hear you." He leaned his head against mine, and we watched the child swing the flashlight like she was painting night with light. And sometimes, on my way to work, I walk the long way on purpose. The way with the hill that makes your calves ache, and the mural on the brick that shows a father teaching a kid how to hold a hammer. I walk it so I can feel the old sensation of trying to get somewhere without being seen, and then I deliberately look up. I meet the eyes of a man selling flowers at the corner and smile. I carry coffee home after my shift, and I leave it on the counter where he will find it, labeled with his name. He comes in with sawdust like glitter, and we kiss hello like people who know the price of words and pay in cash. The bullies in our lives do not all turn into lovers. That is not why I am telling you this. Many should not. And you should never hand your heart to someone who has not shown you a different set of tools than the ones they used to break you. But sometimes, very rarely, like a storm that passes and leaves the air washed and new, a boy who was taught to love by pushing finally learns to love by building. He shows up at your door with his hat in his hands and a box of screws and says, "I cannot change the house you grew up in, but I can help hang your pictures straight so they don't fall in the night." We sleep well now. We argue softly. We love loudly when a kid from the youth center texts a photo of a new studio apartment with 2 plates and a thrift store lamp and writes, "I did it." We cry at the news too often and rest our feet on the ottoman because the day has been long and the world is heavy. We hold each other's faces sometimes like Ms. Porter held the future for me, with no demand that it hurry up. We turn off the lights. He presses the deadbolt. I count to 10 out of habit, a holdover from hard nights, and he waits without teasing. We are learning. We are steady. When the morning comes and the coffee is ready, he says, "Good morning, doctor," with a smile shaped like the first day of school. I say, "Good morning, carpenter," like a thank you I do not have to translate. And in the quiet that follows, I hear the sound the world makes when you forgive it enough to stay. Not applause, not trumpets, just the hum of a house you love settling in for the day, every board snug, every nail holding fast.